Clint Eastwood reveals the actors he secretly admired but never worked with. Every era of Hollywood has its ghosts, the people who shaped it from afar, whose shadows crossed paths but never touched. For Clint Eastwood, a man who spent over half a century redefining American masculinity on screen, admiration was never casual. It was respect earned through silence, through work, through presence. From the spaghetti plains of Sergio Leone's westerns to the smoky tension of Gran Torino, Eastwood became the symbol of control, an actor who didn't speak unless he had to, and a director who never shouted when a whisper would do. But even the most stoic legends keep a list, not of rivals, but of those whose craft he quietly envied, the ones who understood what he understood. That performance isn't about volume, it's about truth. Behind the squint there's a historian, a man who remembers the faces he never shared a frame with, yet studied with reverence. Actors whose philosophies mirrored his, and others who lived in worlds he admired but could never inhabit. The question is, who earns Clint Eastwood's respect without ever standing beside him? And what does that reveal about the man behind the myth? Because when Clint Eastwood speaks of admiration, it's not flattery. It's confession. Marlon Brando. The unpredictable mirror Eastwood never faced. Clint Eastwood admired control. Marlon Brando embodied chaos. Their paths never crossed, but their philosophies collided across decades. Brando's raw emotion was everything Eastwood avoided and secretly respected. He once admitted Brando could explode and still be honest, a balance few achieved. Eastwood didn't imitate him. He studied him, quietly learning how passion could serve discipline without destroying it. In the golden age of American acting, Brando's revolution changed everything. A Streetcar Named Desire and On the Waterfront rewrote what screen performance could be. He was unpredictable, magnetic, untamed, an actor who made audiences feel like they were watching something that might fall apart at any second. For Clint Eastwood, who built his screen presence on the exact opposite, stillness, patience, control, Brando represented a mystery. Eastwood once remarked to a journalist that Brando made the dangerous look natural. He could fall apart and make you think it was part of the plan. That paradox fascinated him. Where most saw chaos, Eastwood saw commitment. He recognized in Brando's improvisations the same hunger for truth he chased behind the camera. Yet Eastwood's method was quieter. Brando wrestled with demons. Eastwood wrestled with the frame. During the 1960s, both men became symbols of masculine rebellion, though in different languages. Brando's was emotional, vulnerable, defiant. Eastwood's was stoic, measured, unspoken. Studios often dreamed of pairing them, but Eastwood declined every overture. He once said, "You don't put two storms in the same sky." Still, Eastwood never dismissed Brando's influence. When directing Mystic River, he cited The Godfather as a masterclass in restraint, calling it the only time chaos learned to whisper. It was his way of admitting that Brando's power, though foreign to him, had shaped his understanding of cinematic honesty. In the end, Brando showed Eastwood that vulnerability could be its own kind of strength. They never met, but they spoke the same cinematic truth from opposite ends of the storm. Paul Newman, the quiet rebel who played the roles Eastwood never needed to. Paul Newman represented what Eastwood valued most, grace without noise. Both men built mythologies out of understatement, yet Newman's warmth contrasted Eastwood's cold resolve. In another universe, they might have shared a frame. Instead, Eastwood admired him from afar. He once said Newman made decency interesting. For Eastwood, that was the rarest skill, turning kindness into strength without losing the edge. Eastwood respected men who understood restraint, and Newman turned it into an art form. From HUD to The Verdict, Newman carried a quiet moral core that felt lived in rather than performed. Eastwood once remarked, "Newman could let a scene breathe without ever losing its pulse." That level of confidence, to hold a moment in silence and still dominate it, mirrored Eastwood's own philosophy. Their careers often ran parallel, two craftsmen resisting the Hollywood machine in their own ways. In the late 1960s, studios imagined them together in Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Eastwood declined, feeling the pairing would be too much quiet in one room. He meant it as respect, not distance. They both knew when to walk away from noise. Beyond performance, Eastwood admired Newman's humanity. Newman didn't preach about integrity, he lived it. Racing cars, funding charity, staying grounded. Eastwood's admiration wasn't about glamour, but about conviction. He once told a biographer, "Paul never had to raise his voice to be heard." In an industry built on ego, Newman carried empathy, Eastwood carried solitude. They were two philosophies of dignity that never collided because they didn't need to. Newman made rebellion feel kind, Eastwood made silence feel powerful. Between them stretched the full spectrum of grace. If they had ever shared the screen, the silence might have said more than the dialogue. And for Eastwood, that was always the highest form of acting. Robert De Niro, the method machine who fascinated Eastwood's discipline. Robert De Niro's intensity fascinated Clint Eastwood. De Niro lived inside roles, Eastwood shaped them from the outside. Their methods were opposites, yet their pursuit of truth was the same. Eastwood respected De Niro's obsessive commitment, the kind that frightened studios but impressed craftsmen. Watching him, Eastwood saw not excess but control, just expressed through fire instead of stillness. When Taxi Driver and Raging Bull redefined screen realism, Eastwood was already directing, quietly absorbing what De Niro represented. Eastwood never believed in full immersion, but he admired De Niro's precision beneath the madness. De Niro works from the inside out. I work from the outside in. It wasn't rivalry, it was recognition between craftsmen using different instruments to play the same melody. Their names surfaced together for projects throughout the 80s, including a planned crime drama that stalled in development. Eastwood later said it was better that way. Two perfectionists on one set might have turned creation into collision. He studied De Niro's performances like a director studies light, understanding it, respecting it, but never trying to control it. What impressed Eastwood most wasn't the transformation, it was the discipline behind it. De Niro could gain weight, lose sleep, vanish into accent and gesture, yet never lose purpose. Eastwood once commented, "You can't fake that kind of commitment, it's carved into the work." Both men became icons of masculine fragility, proof that toughness and truth could coexist. Eastwood's characters held the world at arm's length. De Niro's let it devour them. One built distance, the other burned inside it. But they shared an unspoken code, an understanding that honesty on film requires risk. They never stood shoulder to shoulder in front of a camera, but in spirit, they shared the same frame. Two craftsmen chasing the same ghost of authenticity, one through stillness, the other through fire. Meryl Streep, the precision artist who challenged Eastwood's instincts. Before they met, Eastwood watched Meryl Streep with quiet admiration. Her mastery, her stillness, her exactness, everything he valued in performance. When the bridges of Madison County finally brought them together, she turned his restraint into vulnerability. Eastwood once said, "She hits every note but never makes a sound about it." Streep didn't change him loudly, she changed him completely. When Eastwood cast Streep, it wasn't about marquee names, it was instinct. He wanted truth over theatrics, precision over presence. The film was an experiment. Could the stoic cowboy surrender to emotion? Streep made sure he did. She approached the role like a piece of chamber music, finding rhythm in silence. She knows exactly where the truth sits in a scene. On set, the dynamic was electric but quiet. Eastwood's direction was famously minimal. Few takes, fewer words. Streep thrived in that space, meeting him with equal control. Yet she introduced something unfamiliar: risk. Her performance disarmed him. In one take, when her character's hand trembles near his, Eastwood stayed still longer than scripted. He later admitted it wasn't acting. The film revealed sides of Eastwood audiences had never seen: fragility, tenderness, doubt. Critics hailed it as his most human work. Streep had exposed what his westerns concealed, the ache beneath the armor. She became proof that vulnerability could be as exact as gunfire, as deliberate as silence. Long after, Eastwood called her the most complete actor alive. For him, that meant mastery without ego, precision without coldness. She didn't just elevate the film, she redefined his emotional vocabulary and reshaped how he understood intimacy on screen. In The Bridges of Madison County, Meryl Streep didn't play opposite Clint Eastwood. She revealed the man behind the myth, and made him human in a way no director ever could. Denzel Washington, the heir to Eastwood's moral weight. Clint Eastwood once called Denzel Washington the real deal. What he meant was honesty. Washington carried the same authority Eastwood once defined: quiet, rooted, earned. Though they never shared the screen, Eastwood admired his gravity, his refusal to fake a moment. To him, Washington represented the future of integrity in performance, a mirror of the moral weight Eastwood built his legacy on. Eastwood's respect wasn't born of flattery, it was recognition. Washington possessed the same calm intensity that once defined Eastwood's early characters, but with a deeper empathy. Both men communicated more with a stare than a speech. He doesn't act, he just is. That quality fascinated Eastwood, the ability to hold authority without reaching for it. When Training Day exploded onto screens, Eastwood reportedly screened it twice in one night. He admired Washington's control, the way corruption never erased dignity. It reminded him of the moral ambiguity he'd explored in Unforgiven. Behind Washington's fury, Eastwood saw the same struggle: how good men justify the damage they do. In interviews, Eastwood compared Washington to the classic studio stars, men who let silence carry truth. He respected that Washington never relied on bravado. He's a leader on camera because he never asks for the role. Denzel's already the man every camera trusts. What bound them was more than style, it was creed. Both men believed character was built in silence, in the pauses between lines. Both carried a moral stillness that made their worlds believable. Eastwood once said if he ever directed Washington, it would be a film about choices. For Clint Eastwood, admiration wasn't competition, it was acknowledgement. Denzel didn't inherit his image, he inherited his code, and that, for Eastwood, was the rarest kind of legacy. Akira Kurosawa, the master Eastwood never stopped learning from. For Eastwood, Akira Kurosawa wasn't a filmmaker, he was a philosophy. The samurai films of Yojimbo and Seven Samurai shaped Eastwood's worldview. He called Kurosawa the teacher I never met, and meant it. Kurosawa's silences became his own. Every Eastwood frame, every pause, carries the discipline of that influence, the belief that the truest power in cinema is patience. When A Fistful of Dollars reimagined Yojimbo for the West, it launched Eastwood's legend. Yet behind the poncho and pistol lay Kurosawa's DNA, the moral stillness, the tragic weight of violence. Eastwood studied how Kurosawa composed silence, not as emptiness, but as tension. Kurosawa taught me that waiting can be louder than action. Though they never met, Eastwood treated Kurosawa's films like sacred texts. He screened Rashomon and Throne of Blood before nearly every production, reminding himself that great cinema begins with humility. The Japanese master showed him that violence only matters when it carries consequence. Eastwood often said Unforgiven was his personal dialogue with Kurosawa, an American samurai story where redemption replaced revenge. He showed me that violence only matters when it costs something. That truth became Eastwood's creed. Like Kurosawa's Ronin, his cowboys weren't heroes. They were men burdened by choice, haunted by what they'd done. Even in his later years, Eastwood credited Kurosawa's patience for shaping his rhythm. He said the key was knowing when to stay out of the way. That restraint defined both men, the director in Tokyo and the cowboy in Hollywood, each telling human stories through silence and consequence. Eastwood's films may have worn boots and hats, but their soul belonged to the samurai. In Kurosawa, he found not competition, but kinship, the eternal dialogue between two storytellers who believed silence, when used honestly, becomes the loudest truth in art. Their shared belief in humanity, its fragility, its honor, its flaws, became the invisible bridge linking East and West. In the end, Clint Eastwood's admiration was never about fame. It was about craft. The rare courage to be authentic when pretending was easier. The actors he respected most shared one trait: honesty. Whether it was Brando's chaos, Newman's grace, or Streep's precision, each reminded him that art lives in restraint, not noise. Eastwood's quiet reverence reveals a truth about legacy. It isn't built by who you stand beside, but by what you learn from afar. His career became a dialogue with ghosts, a lifelong study of character over celebrity. Tell us in the comments which of these names surprised you most and who you think Eastwood might still wish he'd worked with. And if you value stories that look deeper than fame, subscribe for more. Because for Clint Eastwood, silence was never emptiness, it was understanding.